Hi, and welcome to the And1 podcast. I am your host, Alex West, and today I'm joined by a friend of the program, Patrick Oxford. This is his fourth, fifth, sixth, who knows, appearance on the podcast. And today we're talking about our top 10 of the 2018 NBA draft. We didn't arrange them by number, strictly speaking. We arranged them in a tier, the guys that we thought. So we talk about their draft range, we talk about their pros and cons, and we talk about their best fit. Make sure you're following the podcast at And1 Analytics on Twitter. Make sure you're following me on Twitter at AlexWestNBA. And make sure to subscribe on SoundCloud, on YouTube, on iTunes, wherever it is you're getting your podcasts. Make sure you're following the show so you keep up to date when we release new episodes. Brent, take us away. My guest today is a longtime guest of the podcast. I think this is, your fourth appearance? But anyway, it is Patrick Oxford of the 94 Feet Report. Patrick, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing excellent. How about you, Alex?
I am very, very good. It is a nice winter evening, winter afternoon, whatever it is, and we're getting ready to talk about the NBA draft, which is something that you and I are both pretty passionate about.
Yeah, it's something I really relish, taking the time to learn about these prospects and kind of project what I think they're going to be able to do in the league.
That's awesome, because that's what we have taken the time to do today. And today we're really going to get into our top 10. Now, an important caveat to this is that we haven't ranked them. We didn't make a big board and rank them 1 through 10. And what we did was sort of take a tier and say, these are the guys that we think are the top 10 in the draft. And then we're going to sort of place them into where they fit best or what we think will give them the most success as prospects. Would you agree that that's sort of how we gauged the experiment today?
Exactly. Wouldn't want to anchor anyone's opinions with our biases. So
exactly. So
totally random order. I don't even know who's going first.
Exactly. I have the list, so I do know who's going first. And I think let's start somewhere that is a very interesting question for American fans. Let's start with Luka Doncic. Now, Doncic played incredibly well in Eurobasket, which I think was the first sort of mainstream exposure he had for American fans. He's a 6'7", 6'6" kind of shooting guard, small forward. He weighs about 220. He's a guy who can get in the lane. He can score. Give us a breakdown on Luka Doncic and what he brings to the table.
Yeah, so the first thing that stands out about Doncic's game is his ability to navigate the pick and roll. He does a really good job of getting between his man and the basket and then keeping his man on his back, similar to I see Chris Paul doing that a lot. James Harden, I'm sure a lot of point guards do. It's not a very uncommon technique, but it's one that and it forces the big to come over and help because his man can't really defend him going to the rim. And he is really aggressive with it. You see a lot of European point guards not necessarily super aggressive scoring the ball, but he's, pedal to the metal. He makes the defense work, and when they do work and rotate, he reads it well.
But he has been fantastic, and one of the things that he can really do is he can score the basketball. He had a big 33-point outburst against Olympiacos. Now, they lost. He plays for Real Madrid, and they played Olympiacos, which is a Greek team, on Friday night. Now, they lost the game, but he had a 33-point performance. He had 6 rebounds and 4 assists, and he really showed the ability to do a lot of things on the basketball court in that game. And I think that's indicative of what Luka Doncic is going to bring to your team is he has a very well-rounded game. You said he's a master in the pick and roll, high-quality player there. But he's also a deceptive rebounder. He's got a big body, a big frame, and he can bang with some bigger players despite only being about 6'6", 6'7". And he also has some great vision. And I think that that's one of the things that when you look at Luka Doncic, is so appealing that he brings this total package to the table.
Yeah, his size brings a nice versatility because it's going to make the defense have to think depending on the lineups that he's using. If he's the smallest person in the lineup, which is very possible, they could be playing some players off the floor at that point with a 6'7", and then let's say Markkanen is playing the 4, I'm sure, if he's in the Bulls, which is a place I'd really like to see him.
Not that you're saying that he's going to be on the Bulls, just that...
No, but if I had my choice, if I was controlling things, he better be on the Bulls.
Okay.
Or else I might have to cry.
Okay.
Because him and Markkanen pick and rolls would just I don't know how that would be covered if they have, the right fit around them. I mean, you can't just throw anything around them and expect it to work. But that's just such a solid fit for a team that I think would obviously have global appeal based on the fact that they have two of the young, bright stars from Europe.
Yeah,
and
having a Finnish player and a Slovenian player certainly draws a different audience than what you usually think for Chicago. That would be... I can't remember a team that had two great Euros at the same time. I mean, maybe I'm blanking on it, but that would be really interesting in terms of a branding experiment.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta figure that if they had lost any global popularity since Jordan had fallen, that would be a great way to grasp Europe by,
you got to get in there.
Balls.
Exactly, you got to get in there and grab all the great Slovenian players. But he really did play tremendously well in Eurobasket, and of course Slovenia won on the back of Doncic's performance as well as Goran Dragic. Mm-hmm. This is a good player, but I think that a lot of fans have a question, and I'll sort of lay this out for you to take me through it. It's very hard to compare the Euro leagues or the Spanish leagues, which is where Doncic plays his regular season games, to the NCAA. Now, what's the talent disparity level that you think when it comes to scouting a player? Does production in the Euro League, does production in the Spanish League sort of reconcile itself with NCAA players, or is it a little bit higher level?
I think it's definitely a higher level. You're playing against grown men, and a lot of the imports, which are usually some of the top players. I mean, they're the top players from college that didn't make the NBA. So, I mean, while there may be the occasional prospect in the NCAA that you're not going to find over in Europe, I mean, Doncic is that prospect that you'd find in NCAA, not in Europe, but he's over in Europe. Like, I don't really remember a prospect that has been putting up stats like him at his age. I don't think there's a historical precedent for it in Europe.
No, he's only 18 years old. He'll be 19 in February. And he has certainly really, really shown a knack particularly for scoring, but for an all-around game, which sort of brings me to my last question on Luka Doncic. Where do you see him fitting best, and what is his draft range at this moment right now? Now, I'm not asking you to project out and see the future and tell me where he's going to go, but what do you see his range at?
I'd be really surprised if he fell outside the top three, unless something just terrific happens. When, knock on wood, that's not going to happen. But, he just has the complete package.
Okay. And what is his
in terms of offensively? What is
his best fit for you? What do you think? I mean, you said Chicago. Is that where you'd like to see him most?
I'd like to see him in Chicago, but I'm not going to say that that's the only place that he could possibly fit. I think that hold on, the Grizzlies are an interesting fit because they have Mike Conley, who can definitely defend and can do everything you possibly could want in a point guard, honestly. And he can play next to Luka Doncic just fine because he can shoot off ball. Playing him next to Gasol would obviously, again, you got that global appeal.
I was going to say another one. Yeah, you're all about this global appeal with Luka Doncic.
Yeah, I mean, I think that his game fits well with European players. Honestly,
I think that just to add my closing thoughts on Doncic, I think that he's one of the guys in a draft where I feel like there are a lot of specialists, a lot of guys who need to be in certain situations to succeed. I feel like Luka Doncic is a player that is probably going to be a good player no matter where he goes. Now, obviously situations are going to be dependent and the levels are going to be different in terms of his success, but he's just one of those guys that has a modern NBA skill set. He can stretch the floor, he can rebound, he can pass, he can do a lot of things. Now, he needs to get quicker, his feet are a little bit slow, and he needs to learn how to defend a little bit better, but at 19 years old, I certainly don't think that's anything that needs to be worried about right now.
Yeah, his just ability to play the 1, 2, or 3 means it's going to be hard to find a place he wouldn't work.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's go on to our second prospect. DeAndre Ayton, playing for the Arizona Wildcats this season. He's having a pretty tremendous season. He's averaging 20.5 points, 11.9 rebounds, and 1.6 assists per game. He's 7'1", he's 250. He's got this tremendous frame. He looks like an NBA player when you watch him play. Now, the Wildcats had a rough middle patch of the season wherein, as you know, they infamously lost 3 games in a row during a tournament at the end of November. They've since recovered, including a really big win over number 7 Texas A&M last Tuesday evening. DeAndre Ayton looks like an NBA player. He plays like an NBA player. He hasn't had a single game where he hasn't scored in double digits. He's only had 2 games where he hasn't had double digits in rebound. Give us a breakdown on this guy.
Yeah, I think the first thing that stands out to me about him is his fluidity. Like, he's just super fluid in everything he does. In terms of scoring in the post, he's at 1 point per possession right now in post-ups. And on his passes out of the post, 1.45 points per possession. So, I mean, he's definitely doing an excellent job finding his teammates whenever the defense does come and force him to give it up. But he hasn't been eager to give it up even. I mean, he shouldn't be either with the way he's able to score. He's got quick moves, both baseline and middle. There's a lot to like about his game. His athleticism is probably, like, I'm not going to say it's as impressive as his fluidity, because I think that's, like, just the most impressive thing about him, but his athleticism is definitely up there as well.
I think length is another big thing for Ayton. He's got a 7-foot, 5-inch wingspan. He's got a 9'3" stand-in reach. He's just long, and it shows when he plays for the Wildcats. And I think that's even something, because of the sheer size of this guy, that's going to translate to an NBA level. He has really worked on a lot of things. You can tell if you watched any of him last year, which I know that you did. Maybe all of our listeners aren't quite as up on watching DeAndre Ayton in high school as probably you or I are, because we spend a lot of time doing this kind of thing. But he has really worked a lot on 2 areas. His footwork is much, much better. He's a much improved player, particularly on the defensive end, never being out of position. And the other thing that I've really been impressed with him is his free throw shooting. There was a little bit of a, as with big guys, he wasn't a great free throw shooter in high school. He shot, I want to say, 60% somewhere in there. I don't have the number right in front of me. But he's certainly shown an improvement, including a game against NC State where he went 12 for 17 from the line. He's had a lot of 5 for 6s, some 7 for 8s. He's a much improved player in those 2 areas, and I think both of those things are tremendously important at the next level.
Agreed, yeah. I think that there's a lot of room to grow in his game.
Now, this is a player that I think a lot of people have mixed feelings on in terms of range. I actually have seen him jump up to the number 1 spot over the past couple of days. I mean, he's played tremendously well. He had a 29-18 against Alabama on Saturday, and now that'll do wonders for your draft stock. But I've seen him as high as 1. I've seen him probably as low as 3. What's your range for DeAndre Ayton?
Yeah, that 1 to 3 sounds about right.
Okay.
I mean, it's hard to see some of these other center prospects going ahead of him.
Right.
So at that point, with the top being comprised primarily of centers, leaves him with a very small range, in my opinion.
What is the best fit for him?
I think Dallas.
Dallas, okay.
Yeah, I think Dallas. I mean, Nerlens Noel is out the door already.
Right.
That's pretty much guaranteed at this point. I'd like to see Nerlens in Cleveland, by the way, just sidebar. And I mean, if I'm going to have to give you another team, I guess Chicago next to Markkanen would just be a devastating front court going forward.
Okay. We're 2 players in, and I've learned that you want everyone to play in Chicago. That's what I've learned. I think
Chicago will have a very easy decision, I think, no matter where they are.
Okay. I mean, they just turn around, pick a good player.
They did just win 3 straight, though, so they could be ruining all of this.
Do you think the tank is over?
The D-Tankathon.
All right, so we're going to move on to our next guy. And again, not in order. We're not putting them out there this way. This is just a list we made. The next guy is Jaren Jackson from Michigan State. He's a freshman. He's 6'11". He weighs 242 pounds. He is averaging 10.8 points and 7.8 rebounds, 1.1 assists per game. He is a player who, to me, represents a lot of peaks and valleys. Give us the breakdown on Jaren Jackson.
Yeah, I think the thing, I'm just going to throw a comp out there early, and I know this is going to be a super hot take, but I just feel strongly about this. I think he could be the next Chris Bosh.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that he moves his feet really well defensively. He's already taken a lot of spot-ups, more spot-ups than he should be taking, but they just have so many guys that can operate down low that there's just not a lot of room for him, honestly. But I think that he's just really is what we're looking for in terms of our 5-man going forward, in terms of looking at the trend of the game and saying, how is the game going to be played in 5 years? And I think you need probably all 5 dudes shooting, or at least 4 of the 5 if maybe your ball handler can't shoot, but he has the ball, so you have to guard him regardless unless he's Rondo level. So I think that his ability to play the 5, possibly the 4 a little bit, go out, switch on perimeter defense. It just is a lot of things to like going forward in his game.
Now, I agree. While I agree with all that, he's a very coordinated player. That's something that you can see. He seems to. There's sort of a thing among 18 and 19-year-olds that they haven't quite grown into their bodies just yet, and they're a little uncoordinated. But he just looks smooth and fluid and very coordinated. My concern with Jackson, and maybe you can alleviate this or maybe you can make it worse, he's only played more than 30 minutes in a game one time, and it was against DePaul on the 23rd of November. The rest of the time he's in the teens or the 20s in terms of minutes. Now, I don't love that. And then the other thing is that they've played 3 ranked opponents this season. Now, I know what you're going to say, that ranked games against ranked opponents aren't the be-all, end-all when it comes to projection. He played very well against Duke with a 19-7, but in games against North Carolina and Notre Dame, he had a 3 and 5 point game where he pulled 5 and 3 rebounds. So the 3 points and 5 rebounds against Carolina, and then 5 points and 3 rebounds against Notre Dame, both of which they won the game, and they won both of them by 20 plus. But he didn't have a huge impact on either of those games, and that combined with the minutes gives me a little bit of pause when it comes to Jaren Jackson.
Okay, so I mean, addressing the stamina issues, I do think there's concern there, but it's not something they can't improve upon. Like, Clint Capella is just now getting to the point where he can play 30 minutes a game.
Okay.
So I don't think that it's something that you can't just steadily build up over a player's career.
All right.
Does that mean that he probably can't come out and be a superstar year one? Like, I think that probably does point to that. Yeah.
Okay.
Because he's just not going to have the tank and the gas.
What about
or the gas in the tank?
What about his inability to perform? Not inability. I mean, that's a pretty strong word. But what about his lack of performance against high caliber opponents?
So I think there's something to say about that, but I'd like to have a larger sample size in 3 games where he did well in one of the games. So, and also in terms of young players, inconsistency isn't the worst thing to me because you want to see those peaks because these really good players, if he's going to be a really good player, I don't know for sure that he's going to be, but if he is, what they usually do is they don't build upon the good performances. Maybe they do a little bit, but it's more cutting out the bad performances. The bad performances become the outliers as the good performances become the norm.
Okay.
So the ability to get to those good performances is what I'm looking for, not necessarily that they have the good performances every time. So I guess standard deviations would be important here. So I don't necessarily care if a young player has a high standard deviation on his scoring because if a dude's averaging, or if 2 players are averaging 14 points per game, one of them is because he put up 31 game and the rest of his stats are pulling it down, and the other dude's just scoring that every single game. Going forward, I'll take the dude who got 30 in one of the games.
Yeah. That totally makes sense. It always brings up questions, and I think they're questions that you have to ask. If you're doing your due diligence as a scout, I think you have to ask the questions, why is he not performing well? Not necessarily weighting it or equating it with his draft stock, but I think it's so important to ask. And like you said, it's a small sample size, and it's likely to change, and that's all there is to it. But I felt like, it was something we needed to explore because it has been an issue for him, both of those things. Now, what is his range for you?
Well, before I get to range, I just want to bring up some defensive stats for him. Because offensively, it's easy to be inconsistent at that young age. But defensively, he's been consistent because defending spot-ups, roll-mans, he's been really good. And then in isolation, 18.3% of his defense, 95th percentile, only .267 points per possession. Not a huge sample, but the fact that it's almost a fifth of his defense – and he's doing so well makes me believe that he definitely can move his feet.
There we go. And now, he looks like an interesting defensive prospect. We know that he's a very fluid offensive player, and he certainly has tremendous upside. Where does this put him in what range for you?
So I'd say he's not going to be in that top pick conversation, but to see him fall farther than 6 or 7 would be pretty surprising to me.
Okay. And where is his best fit?
Dallas would probably be a best fit for him too, I think.
Okay.
Him and Ayton, I think, would both excel there for different reasons, but they would both excel there. I think Atlanta, next to John Collins, he can cover up a lot of what John Collins can't do on defense, because John Collins definitely looks like an exciting offensive player. And I think that Jaren Jackson can be that player next to him that maybe forms a pretty scary front court going forward.
All right, sounds good. Now, the next guy we're going to get to has one of the most compelling storylines and one of the hardest to project as a result of it. It's, well, I say Missouri. I was going to say Missouri's Michael Porter, but I suppose that's not necessarily true. It's Michael Porter. Now, Porter is 6'10". He's 215 pounds. He plays a little bit of both forward positions. But, and it's very important that we hear this, but he had to have back surgery at the age of 19, and it was on his lower back, his lumbar region. And this is a surgery that a lot of people, including Steve Kerr, have said is quite a nasty surgery. Now, Porter, tremendous player, great projections. He looks like, I saw this comparison and I felt really good about it. Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's true, but I felt really good about a comparison when you hear him as a taller Jason Tatum. Now, Tatum has been a tremendous rebounder that used his frame very, very well for the Boston Celtics this year. But when you hear that, it certainly is appetizing for teams to look at Michael Porter. But, Patrick, give us the full breakdown on Porter and where you think this surgery puts him.
Yeah, see, I'm not necessarily a medical expert here, so
all right.
I don't know how the surgery is going to affect him. I know it's really scary. Steve Kerr, like you said, was very adamant that he would not recommend the surgery and that he would recommend, just normal healing. However, that I don't know the process of normal healing or whatever it is, but I don't know if that was an option for him or not. But it's going to be interesting to see, because if he comes back from it and he's good, he's top 5 prospect, easily probably a top 3 pick, because he does a lot of really nice things on the court. I think the Tatum comparison was interesting. I hadn't heard that before, but you threw it out there, and I was automatically like, okay, I'm already seeing the similarities there,
right?
Especially with how Tatum's playing this year, and I think that's like if you got Porter in a role like Tatum is playing in right now, that's like how you get 100% chance that Porter succeeds.
Now, Porter's 6'10". He's a big guy. Do you see him translating more as a 3, which is traditionally what he's played? I guess in high school is our only way to rule that. And he's classified as a small forward. But at 6'10", it feels like he might be able to stretch the floor a little bit and play 4, maybe even 5 as team starts to go smaller. Is that something you could see from Michael Porter, or is the height number a little bit deceptive when it comes to that?
I think that he has to at least be able to play some 4. Doesn't necessarily need to be his primary position. As long as he can shoot. If he can't shoot, then yeah, he's got to play the 4.
Okay.
But I think the shooting is going to eventually translate.
One of the things that I noticed while watching him, and again, this is what killed me. I was really, really interested and excited to watch Michael Porter play, because I got a lot of Kevin Love in him. He doesn't have a tremendous wingspan. He's a good shooter. He can stretch the floor. He seems to me like that prototypical soft stretch 4 that we've seen so much. Now, he's a little bit better on the perimeter when it comes to guard and pick and rolls and that kind of thing. But I saw a lot of Kevin Love in his game in that he doesn't have a tremendous wingspan. He doesn't have quick feet, but he brings a lot to the table offensively. And while I know that's not an apples-to-apples comparison, I was very interested to see how that was going to work at an NCAA level, to see if he could evolve and adapt his game. But unfortunately, with a 3 to 4 month injury, I don't know that we're going to see much of Michael Porter this year.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see any of Porter from this point going forward until probably – I wouldn't even say he's going to play in Summer League. I wouldn't play him in Summer League if he's recovering from back surgery. I'd say preseason.
All right, let's ask the most difficult question in the show. What's the range on Michael Porter?
I'm gonna say 4 to 7.
4 to 7. Don't think
Yeah.
don't think he's fallen any lower than 7. I mean, I think that's fair. He was projected early on as maybe the best player in this class. The injury not as bad as what happened with Harry Giles with 2 ACL tears. This is certainly a situation that is worth following very closely because there's so many different trajectories that this could develop along when it comes to recovery from the surgery, when it comes to rehabilitation, and then when it comes to the ever important private workouts that will start in April and May.
Yeah, he's got a lot of power in those private workouts because there's not going to be any way to get his medical records unless he says, "Here's my medical records." So he has a lot of choice of where he goes, I think.
That is going to be worth following. And I think we're going to talk a lot more about Michael Porter, but at the moment, there's just not that much. He's a little bit of a mystery. So let's go on to our next guy. The next guy I have might be my favorite player. Well, no, I'm not even going to say might. I'm going to say he is my favorite player in the draft. It's Duke's Marvin Bagley. Bagley's 6'11". He's 234 pounds, and he has had a tremendous year for the Blue Devils. He's averaging 21.3 points per game, 11.3 rebounds, 1.5 assists, and he has showed up and just been the best player on the best team in the country. Now, you can debate that however you want to, but he has been a fantastic player. Give us the Marvin Bagley breakdown.
Yeah, Bagley, like you said, he's been just super explosive. It looks like he's just shouldn't be playing against players in this league, or at least most players in college right now. Like,
right.
It's amazing that he should be playing in high school right now. That's just the most crazy thing. This dude should be playing in high school, and he's dominating against college players, looking like he should be a pro player.
He is. I mean, it's just like you said. He should be in high school, but he also looks like he's outclassing a lot of the NCAA. He is one of the compelling arguments, or at least from what I had seen, one of the compelling arguments to reinstate or to change the one-and-done rule. A lot of people wanted Bagley to be able to jump from high school straight to the NBA, which is a very jarring transition.
Yeah.
But he's been a tremendous player, and to me, I think he's the number one pick. He's the guy. All things being equal, doesn't matter what team. If I had to choose one guy in this draft, I think Bagley would be my guy. He's been phenomenal. He's smooth. He's a great leaper. He plays pretty consistently on the defensive end. He certainly has room to grow, but I really like his foot placement. I really like the way he challenges shots and alters shots and uses his wingspan. And for me, those are two things that I really enjoy. And then the last thing on Bagley that I think is a huge, huge deal is Bagley's left-handed. And he can use his left hand, which is not as big a deal in the NBA as it is in Major League Baseball because you love those left-handed hitters. But it's something. We've had a lot of success at left-handed players, particularly at the guard position. But I think Bagley will be able to use that to his advantage when it comes to the NBA.
Yeah, I think there's going to be some challenges for him at the NBA in terms of positionality.
Okay.
I think he's going to take a unique fit to maximize his strengths because offensively, I think he's clearly a 5. But defensively, can he be your 5?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
He looks very skinny to me. I mean, that's one of the things when I watch him.
His wingspan isn't great either.
Yeah, he's very skinny. He uses his wingspan very well, and he challenges shots. But when it comes to a much more physical league, I could certainly see him getting bumped off his spot, particularly when it comes to playing against larger 5s. We've had a breakout year for 5s with Joel Embiid, with Kristaps Porzingis, with a lot of young guys, but particularly circling Embiid as one of those players that you'll be challenging no matter where you go in the NBA. I could see him having a very difficult time. Now, he has started to stretch his game. In the past 2 games, he's attempted 7 3-pointers. So I think somewhere behind the scenes, you're starting to see a push for expanding his game.
Okay.
But I certainly see what you mean when it comes to his limited positionality on the offensive end. Now, that's something that hopefully will change. But I'm really high on Marvin Bagley, and I don't know what it would take to bring me down from this. What is your range for him?
My range probably 3 to 7.
Three
Yeah, I
to
would say
seven.
3 to 7. I think, yeah, that
Okay.
sounds about right because I think that, like I said, the larger window is because of the limited positionality.
Sure.
I've had smaller windows for the other players because I think that it's a matter of BPA to a point, but you also have to look at how do we plan to build around this player. So I think at the worse the team is, the more they have to think about, okay, where does this put us next year, and what can we do next year to build around Bagley if we pick him now?
Yeah, that's a really compelling point. That he's a player that you need to build around. In terms of like personnel and fit and that
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. And we've seen that be successful. I mean, Philadelphia certainly has constructed a roster around Ben Simmons and his unique set of abilities, but it's something you really have to commit to in order to maximize that player. And when you have a high draft pick, you really try to maximize them. Who do you think's the best fit for Bagley?
I'd like to see Bagley, Memphis. I think would be awesome next to Marc Gasol.
Okay.
The Knicks would be awesome, but they're just playing too well, sadly. Porzingis is out here saying he really wants to make the playoffs, so they're definitely just going to be pushing for that all year and put themselves probably out of the Bagley race unless they luck out. But him next to Porzingis would just be destructive in terms of both of them covering up for, I think, flaws in positionality. Not that they're not both great players, but they both do have certain positional uniqueness that is hard to match up, and it seems to me it's like a puzzle just fitting together with them two.
For sure. All right. Next guy on our list, Alabama's Collin Sexton. Now, Sexton is 6'3". He's 190 pounds, playing for the Crimson Tide this year. And obviously, the game that we all know the most, if you've been following college basketball, was Sexton's 40-point outburst against Minnesota, wherein they finished the game with 3 players and very nearly beat the number 14 ranked Minnesota Golden Gophers. Give us a breakdown on Sexton. He looks really compelling, but his size might limit him. I'm not sure how you feel about that, so let us know.
I'm pretty high on Sexton. I feel like just offensively, he scores in a lot of different ways. He's scoring 1.066 points per possession as a pick and roll ball handler, which puts him in the 87th percentile. That's just about a third of his offense. Gets over 20% of his offense in transition, so he's really pushing the pace. I like that. Isolation, we saw him score in isolation on double teams in a 3-on-5 game, so I don't think he's going to have much trouble doing that, honestly. He's scoring 1.143 points per possession in isolation, 85th percentile. And, I mean, spotting up, he hasn't been as good as you'd like, but I think he's a player you put the ball in his hands, so the spot up numbers don't really worry me too much.
Now, we talked about, when we were talking about Jaren Jackson, we talked about players that don't necessarily live up to the limelight. Collin Sexton is the exact opposite. They played 2 games against high-ranked opponents or opponents that seem to be quality opponents. They played Minnesota, in which he had his 40-point outburst, and they also played Arizona, which they lost the game. This was on Saturday evening, but Sexton had another 30-point performance. He's averaging 21.8 points a game. His rebound and assist numbers are a little low. I mean, he's 3.6 rebounds, which is fine. He's 6'3". His assist numbers a little bit frightening at only 3.3 per game, but maybe that's something you can attribute to a lack of really high quality teammates playing in Alabama. But I think that Sexton is a player a lot like last season. De'Aaron Fox was this way, was a guy who really brought it when the stage was the biggest. And I think that's a very good sign for where he's going to project in this draft.
Yeah, I think Sexton's game lends itself to more assists at the NBA level as the game is more spaced out.
Okay.
There's just he just brings so much fight to the game.
That's exactly what I mean. Is like he's a guy who shows up when he's needed the most. He plays very well. I really, really would like to see Alabama get into the tournament. They're a 3-loss team right now. They're playing in the SEC, which is not traditionally a huge power conference outside of Kentucky. But I really, really would like to see him play in the tournament this year. Now, that's not about projecting him at all. That's just about me wanting to see this kid play. Because I think he's one of those guys who can go off for 38 in a tournament game to get Alabama to the Sweet 16 if the need should arise. What do you see the range for Sexton at?
5 to 8.
5 to 8, okay. And before we go on to the best fit question, is it because of his size? I mean, does his size really inhibit him at the next level?
Yeah, see, I was even struggling at the 5 because I think his size is going to be a little bit of a struggle, but there's going to be teams that are just going to say, we don't care. We want him.
Yeah, I mean, he does have a 6'7" wingspan, so he makes up for it a little bit, but 6'3", 190 is definitely not a guy that you're looking at as your go-to scorer. You don't really want to be super reliant on a guy like that unless he's got the ability to get to the rim like a Kyrie Irving or an Isaiah Thomas.
I think he could eventually have that, though. Like,
okay.
The way he was splitting the double teams in that 3-on-5 game, like, he's not going to have trouble getting to where he wants on the court, I don't think.
What a ridiculous game, by the way. Just sort of as a sidebar, that there are still rules at the NCAA level that a team can finish with 3 players. I mean, say what you want to about the NBA game. I love it, but the rule with the technical so that the game continues at 5-on-5, I think, is a little bit more well-suited to quality basketball. Because once you lose a player, you're pretty much done. That's pretty much the game.
Well, you'd think so, but
unless
Alabama
you got Collin Sexton.
Come back.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Alabama made it come back.
All right, Sexton, who's his best fit?
I'd like to see him in Phoenix next to Devin Booker.
Okay, that is a very interesting comparison. He would, I guess, play the 1 and Booker would play the 2? Is that
exactly?
Okay.
Exactly, man.
That would be a high-scoring backcourt. All right, you just nailed that one right on the head. You know who you want Collin Sexton to play for.
The Magic would be another, I think, a solid pick.
Okay. Yeah, and that one makes sense as well because they have been a little bit limited in the guard area while Vucevic and Aaron Gordon have played well. They haven't. I mean, Evan Fournier has been fine, but you definitely would like to see another high-quality guard in that system.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's go on to our next guy. It is Mohamed Bamba out of Texas. He's 6'11". He's 225 pounds. His stats are a little bit deceptive. I don't know. We'll get into it a little bit more in a minute, but he's 10.7 points and 10.1 rebounds with 0.6 assists per game. Break down Mohamed Bamba for us.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I think, Capella potential in his game, I'd say.
Okay.
He's got a much longer wingspan than Capella. I think it's 7'9", but I think in terms of how to best maximize his use, people are saying that he's got some sort of a jumper, and I don't really have much confidence in that, honestly.
Okay.
if someone wants to park him on the 3-point line and not use his vertical gravity, then I guess they do them.
Sure. One of my concerns about Bamba, and I watched him play the Duke game, I watched him play the Gonzaga game, and then I watched him really early on against Northwestern State, so I've seen him 3 times. One of my real concerns about Bamba, and maybe you can alleviate it, maybe not, is that he disappears sometimes. And that's never a player that you really are excited about taking in the top 10. You don't want a player who's disappearing for stretches of the game where you go, oh yeah, Bamba's in. And that's something I found myself doing more often than not. Now, I haven't watched all the games, and I certainly have missed some of his better performances, including a 13-13 against VCU this past Tuesday. But what do you think about that for Bamba, his sort of inability to impose his will at all times on a game?
I agree with you that it definitely happens. But like I was saying earlier, the inconsistencies with freshmen, and by inconsistency, normally I don't mean effort-wise because that's not a good sign. I usually speak more on inconsistency in terms of stats. But I think the fact that when he is trying, he really is just like a dominant force defensively, at least.
Yeah.
Not guarding post-ups. He's actually really bad guarding post-ups. But in terms of just rim protection,
yep,
he's really a force.
Okay.
So I think a comp that I think people are going to react kind of wrongly to is Hasheem Thabeet if he had worked out.
Okay.
If he had worked out.
The comparison I saw was Rudy Gobert, which might be a little bit on the other end, where that's
super optimistic.
Yeah, I was going to say where that's a super optimistic comparison. So there's your range, Mohamed Bamba fans. He can either be Hasheem Thabeet, who worked out, or he can be Rudy Gobert. Let's hope he's not Hasheem Thabeet without working out.
Yeah, and see, that's kind of what I was hinting at before we started recording about a team that may not want to take a chance on him in Memphis because of those scars they have passing up on Harden.
Sure. Who do you think? Well, Philip, first, what is his range?
I'd say 5 to 9.
5 to 9. And who's his best fit?
Best fit? Maybe the Lakers.
Okay.
Suns would be interesting with the front court they already have in terms of mixing and matching Bender, Chris, and Bamba.
I think for me the most interesting question is when you have a Mohamed Bamba, what you have is a player who's limited offensively, and you want to put him in a situation where he's not called upon to do a lot of the heavy lifting on the offensive end. And I think that you made the perfect example there when you said the LA Lakers. The Lakers have a lot of young players who can carry the scoring load, sort of situationally depending on what they decide to do with Randall. Maybe his days as a Laker are numbered. But they have Brandon Ingram, who is a scorer by any stretch of the word. They have Lonzo Ball, who can score and also can create for other people. Now, he hasn't quite played up to what he wanted to, but that is a team and a very good comparison for a team that I think can conceal a lot of the inconsistencies in Bamba's game while emphasizing the things that he does really well.
Yeah, maybe the Clippers, depending on what happens with DJ.
Yeah, true. And he would be a pretty good DJ replacement, and that might even be a fair comp when DJ was coming out of college. It took him a couple of years to play into what he could be, and I think that's the same way with Bamba. It might take him a couple of years to be the player that he'll become.
Yeah, another team I think will definitely not take a chance on him just based on their interactions with Nerlens Noel is the Mavericks.
Okay.
This whole not bringing it every single day, obviously that didn't fly with Nerlens, and I don't see them taking their next center as a project like that as well.
All right. On to our next guy, a guy who certainly jumped up the boards. He has a wide variance of where he has ended up, but it's Trey Young from Oklahoma. Now, some boards have him as low as, 17, 18. Some boards have him high as 8 or 9. He certainly has had a couple of breakout performances in the past week, starting with a 33-point game against Oregon, or 43-point game against Oregon. He's ripped off 32 against North Texas, 28 against University of Texas San Antonio, and then 29 in a win against number 25 USC on Friday. This kid can score the rock. Now, he's only 6'2", he's 180 pounds, but he's averaging 28.8 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 8.8 assists. This is a player with huge, huge upside.
Yeah, what he does with the ball is we haven't seen it since Steph Curry in college. I think that's pretty safe to say.
Okay,
at this point.
That's a hell of a
I'm not saying he's going to be the next Steph Curry, but the fact that he has the potential to maybe... Go ahead.
I'm making that the lead, by the way. That's all I wanted to say. Is
okay, that's fine.
Patrick Oxford says Trey Young as good as Steph Curry.
Perfect.
All right.
Just put quotes around it.
I will.
Put quotes around it. Yeah, I think the fact that he has maybe the potential to be 75% of Curry means he's got a really high ceiling in the draft.
All right. What range would you put him in? I mean, this is a guy who's very hard to nail down a range for him right now. He seems to be on the rise, and I think that's universally accepted. But where do you put him?
It depends on how he finishes out this year a lot, because I think he could go as high as top 5, or he could go as low as later lottery, 10 or so, just because his conference play is going to matter a lot. If he can keep putting up, I'm not going to say he's got to put up the 30 and 8 or whatever he's averaging right now, but if he's putting up 25 and 7 through conference play, it's hard to see a team being like, hey, we can afford to pass up on potentially the next Steph Curry.
I watched this Oregon game, and I watched a little bit of the USC game, so I've only seen him play twice. But the thing that really interests me most about Trey Young is he doesn't get locked in. And when I say that, I mean a lot of times when you see a scorer get in the zone, particularly a young scorer, and the kid's a freshman, when you see a young scorer get in the zone, you see a guy who gets the blinders to his teammates and sort of goes at the basket and tries to get his point to him. And, when you have a talented scorer, that usually works out pretty well. But the thing I noticed about Trey Young is when he starts to score very well, he never puts the blinders on. In that game against Oregon, he had 7 assists to go with his 43 points. In the game against USC, he had 9 assists to go with 29 points. So this is a kid who just generally creates on the offensive end.
Yeah, in isolation, he's scoring 1.348 points per possession, which is the 95th percentile. Like, that's just – it's only 11% of his offense, 23 possessions so far. So, it's not just like he's going to it every play. But when he wants to score in isolation, he can score in isolation. That's just the fact of the matter. As a pick-and-roll ball handler, 0.938 points per possession. So, he's doing it well there. And defensively, I think he's really underrated. He's only allowing 0.524 points per possession as the pick-and-roll ball handler defender, and 0.577 points per possession defending spot-ups.
He is a compelling player, but for so many reasons, his ability to score the basketball. And I think when you flip it on the other side, one of the cons is, again, his size may limit him. Where do you see him playing his best basketball?
So it's interesting because I feel like he could fit on any team just for the fact that he's exactly what you're looking for in a point guard going forward in today's NBA, except for maybe you could say maybe he should be 2 inches taller, but he can't do anything about that. So as far as everything within his power, I think he's done everything to make himself playable on any team.
Okay. That's a pretty great comparison. And he's one of those guys who's going to grab a lot of attention if he continues to score at this rate. And I think his draft stock is listen, if you're listening to the podcast right now, buy into some Trey Young draft stock because he's on the rise right now.
Yeah, definitely. I see people having him mid-teens. I'm like, that's a worst case scenario. That to me, that means you're assuming he gets to conference play and he just drops off.
Yeah, because at the rate he's going right now, you said Steph Curry. Now I'm going to say I don't think it's crazy to see him playing his way into a top 5 pick right now. With the way that he's playing, if he can continue to show this effectiveness and he can continue to carry the Sooners the way he has, the Big 12 is a good conference and he's a great player. And so we'll get a really good idea of what he's going to bring to the table here pretty shortly as conference play opens up. But I don't think it's completely out of the realm of possibility that Trey Young is a top 5 pick this year.
Yeah, I think we're on the same
Awesome.
Wavelength on Young.
All right, that affirms that I feel like I'm doing my homework correctly here when you say that.
Thanks, man. Thanks.
Now, the next guy I have on the list, another really interesting prospect and another guy who's very, very much on the rise, and that's the junior out of Villanova, Mikkel Bridges. This is a player that certainly people thought of early on as a 3-and-D player. He didn't come out last year. There was some consideration with it. He decided to go back for his junior season. And I think it's been a really, really good idea for Mikkel Bridges to do that. His numbers maybe aren't what you would think of. He's an 18.1 point scorer, 6.4 rebounds, and 1.7 assists. Now, those are okay numbers. They don't really jump off the page at you. But I think the 3-and-D, not specialist, but a really quality two-way player is what you get when you get Mikkel Bridges.
Yeah, I think if you're drafting Mikkel Bridges, it's like you're drafting a floor of Robert Covington, maybe?
Wow.
Offensively, the shooting, he's going to have some work to do on the shooting, but defensively, man, he's in the 99th percentile on overall defense, allowing 0.365 points per possession. As a pick-and-roll ball handler defender, 0.368 points per possession. Wow. Spot up, he's allowing a whole half a point per possession. And then in isolation, he's allowing 0.455 points per possession.
Man, I just had to take a second and think about that. That is unbelievable.
I know. His defense is just absurd. Like, he can guard 1 to 4. I'm pretty confident about, like, and offensively, he's done everything you'd want from him to show this season in terms of, like, plug him into any system and he can be a role player in any system. I don't think he's going to be a superstar on offense, but if you care about defense, he's going to be a superstar.
That is a great lead into what he is as a player, because the thing about Bridges is, had he come along 15 years ago, he may not have been as highly looked upon as he is now, and he may have fallen off. But I think basketball's gotten so smart, and scouting has gotten so good at identifying these players that are going to fit well at a pro level, even if they don't play at high-level colleges or even if they're not producing at high levels. They find these guys, and I think Mikkel Bridges is one of those guys that he is perfectly cut from the mold of an NBA player, and when he comes into the league, probably as a 2, he can guard threes a little bit. I mean, he certainly does at the NCAA level, but he's going to be a really, really good player from out of the gate, I think.
So now I'll give you his offensive numbers. Spot up, 1.429 points per possession. Transition, 1.444. Pick and roll ball handle, only 0.786, but I don't expect that to be his role anyways. The fact that he's running 10% of his offense as a pick and roll ball handler is pretty impressive to me right now.
Okay.
Anyways. Post up, 1.462. Again, I don't expect him to go to it in the NBA, but hey, if he can guard point guards and then the other team tries to sneak a Isaiah Thomas type player, throw it to him in the post, see what he can do, you know? Like,
sure.
And then just to show he can move off ball, 1.727 points per possession on cuts.
I've watched him 3 times. I watched him play against Tennessee and Northern Iowa because it was Thanksgiving, and you can.
That Tennessee game was awesome.
It was. He played tremendously in that game, but I think the game that's impressed me the most was his game against Gonzaga, and he had 28 points. He had 6 rebounds, and he just was everywhere. Getting hands in passing lanes, just making things generally difficult on the defensive end for Gonzaga. He's a player who imposes his will defensively on a game, and you always know when he's playing. What do you see the range for him as?
I'd like to see some team go for him in the top 5, but I'm just not sold it's going to happen because they're looking for that pick they can sell to the fans, and I think it'd be hard to sell that to the majority of casual NBA fans.
Right.
So I'm going to go ahead and be a little bit safer and say 7 to 10.
Okay, that's fair. And where do you see? I mean, this is a very silly question since we've obviously outlined him as a prototypical NBA player, but where do you see his best fit?
I guess I'd like to see him in a team that already is like set up to not count on him to be a superstar. That'd be the main thing. Like, you can't send him to, let's say, the Hawks. I think sending him to the Hawks would be a bad idea.
Yeah.
Because I mean, they may be the wing university over there, but I think the expectations would be too high for where they're going to be picking. But put him in a situation like the Hornets with Steve Clifford as his coach. Wow.
I'm very excited, and his draft stock is a little bit in fluctuation. He's on the rise right now. If he ends up in that like 5 or 6 range when it's all said and done, I think him in a Brad Stevens system, if the Lakers pick ends up getting relayed to the Celtics, would be a really, really fun thing for.
That'd be absurd. The Celtics or the Sixers.
Yeah, both of those would be. I mean, can you imagine pairing Robert Covington with Robert Covington 2.0?
Yep, and you just have Ben Simmons and Embiid and Redick, I guess, spacing the floor. I don't even know if that fifth really matters. Redick would be perfect for spacing. I changed my mind.
I changed my mind. I don't want that. You're scared. Don't put that. Don't put that in the division with the Boston Celtics, please.
I knew you wouldn't like that when you really thought about it.
No, I don't. I changed my mind. I don't want that. Please don't let that happen.
That would just be the most suffocating defense.
All right. The 10th player in our top 10, we actually have 11, so you're getting a little bit of a freebie. 11 players in our top 10. The 10th player in our top 10 is Miles Bridges, a sophomore out of Michigan State. He's 6'7". He's 225 pounds. He's averaging 15.6 points per game, 6.9 rebounds, and 2.2 assists. What is it about Miles Bridges that is so compelling?
I think his ability to play the 3 and the 4 at the next level. He projects as a at least a weak side rim protector, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Just because his ability, he doesn't have the greatest wingspan, but he has really good instincts. I think his wingspan's like 6'9", maybe 6'9.5", but just instincts wise, he really knows where to be on the court. I would have liked to see his shooting be better this season than it is.
Yeah,
his free throw shooting is amazing, so I don't have doubts that his shooting is gonna project to the NBA. But I mean, just as far as like just seeing him improve in everything every year, I'd like to see it get better. But I think he's a pretty safe pick at the late lottery.
Okay, let's throw out a wild comparison. Now, you made your Steph Curry, Trey Young comparison. I'd like to throw out a wild comparison of my own. When I watch Miles Bridges, and when I say this, you're going to understand why I said it, because there are a lot of similarities in terms of the color of the jersey they wear. When I see Miles Bridges play, I actually see a lot of Draymond Green. He's a guy who's kind of a utility knife. Now, he's a little bit smaller than Draymond, and he's probably not that high-level rim protector.
I'm not sure he is smaller than Draymond in terms of height. Wingspan, he definitely is.
Right, wingspan and general size. He doesn't have like Draymond was stocky. He's big, and he's still big. And Bridges is not quite that big. But I see a lot of that utility knife, Swiss Army knife kind of play when I see Miles Bridges, a guy who can get it done a lot of different ways. He plays a good defense. He's a good passer. He's a good rebounder. He's just good. So go ahead and shoot that full of holes.
No, I'm not shooting it full of holes. I like that. When I was on the podcast with Will Walker, we were talking about the Big Ten prospects. And for Miles Bridges, my comp was Tobias Harris. I think he actually had the same player. He had Tobias Harris too as his comp. And I mean, not to say he's going to be the exact same player or anything, but I think Tobias brings a lot of different tools offensively. He's becoming a good defender, maybe decent defender. And that's kind of what you can expect from Bridges, I think. Maybe more help side defense from Bridges, more of a 4 than a 3, even though he's a little bit shorter than Tobias.
I agree with you. I think at 6 foot. I think at 6'7", he might be a little bit short for the 4, but like guys like Rondé Hollis Jefferson have shown that you can make that work in certain lineups.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Hollis Jefferson's awesome.
What is your range for Miles Bridges?
I was a lot higher on him before the season. Before the season, I thought he might have the potential to be that top 5, but I don't think that anymore. I'd say 8 would be his ceiling maybe now, and then 13 floor.
That's still a pretty respectable range. I think he's the kind of player that maybe would have again fallen through the cracks in years past, but we've started to see the quality of these two-way players who can get it done on both ends of the floor. Where is his best fit?
Best fit for Miles Bridges, the Clippers would be nice. I think I wouldn't mind seeing the Clippers just because I think that I think DJ is going to leave, so that would be somewhere where I think he could play the 3, the 4 next to Gallo and Blake. He wouldn't have to start right away because I don't think that he should be starting right away.
Okay.
And he could just work his way in eventually, and maybe they experiment with some small ball, Blake at 5, Bridges at 4, Gallo at 3, something like that, or Bridges at 3, Gallo at 4, however you want to sort it out.
I'm still really high on Sendarius Thornwell, and I think those two would be a very nice 1-2 tandem. Even if it was off the bench, I would really enjoy seeing Miles Bridges and Sendarius Thornwell, both guys who do a little bit on both ends of the floor. That's a pretty fun comparison, I think.
Yeah, the Sixers, another team that could be interesting to see him on.
Overall, you cannot put him on the Sixers.
Yeah, I knew no one could go to the Sixers. The Sixers are going to have to go ahead and pick some second-round scrub that probably isn't going to come over as a first pick just to keep Alex happy.
Yeah, exactly. I will find the perfect player for the Sixers. Just listen, if you're listening, Brian Colangelo, hit me up. I'll give you exactly who you should pick. And just pick them. Don't do any research on them, okay? All right, last player in our top 10, our 11th player, is Kevin Knox out of Kentucky. He's 6'9". He's 215 pounds. He has a lot of positional questions, but he's having a pretty good year for the Wildcats. He's averaging 15.2 points, 5.8 rebounds, 1.9 assists. This is a player that at one point was thought to be one of the most talented, 2 or 3 guys in this class. He's fallen off a little bit since then. What do you think about Kevin Knox?
I think his jump shot looks good. It hasn't hit at a great clip yet, but it looks really good. He can shoot off the hang dribble, which is pretty important, I think, if he's going to be a creator at the next level, which I would assume is what people project him as.
I think so.
Yeah, I think people – I mean, defensively he's got a lot of work to do. Defending the pick-and-roll ball handler, 1 point per possession, which is the 16th percentile. So definitely some work needed to be done there. I think that he's got potential, though. I mean, definitely the 6'9" frame. I project him as a shooter. I mean, he's not hitting yet, but I do think he's going to be like a good shooter.
He's got a good wingspan. One of the things that I notice about when I watch him play is he always seems to be smaller than I think he is, which is a very strange thing to say. But when you look at him,
I noticed the same thing, man.
Okay.
I noticed the same thing.
He just seems to be smaller. Like, he's not quite as imposing as maybe he looks. I don't know how to explain it better than that. Maybe you can do a better job.
No, dude, I didn't know how to describe it, which is why I didn't want to bring it up. But since you brought it up, I'm hopping on. Yeah, like when I was looking for him on the court every single time, I'm like, okay, that's him. But 6'9", how tall is this other dude?
Yeah, that's the same thing. I just look at him, and maybe I'm trying to project him into a role where he's a 3 who switches to a 4 in smaller lineups. But man, it just doesn't look. He looks to me from time to time more like a guy who plays a 3 and maybe a 2 than a guy who plays a 3 into a 4, which is not necessarily what I'm saying he'll project at. But when I watch him play, I kind of get that 2-3 feel more than I get that 3-4 shift feel, which you get with a lot of guys. Maybe it's just he plays more like a guard. I don't know.
Yeah, he definitely plays more like a guard than a forward. I don't know that he'll be able to guard 2s, so I'm
right
to say the 2-3 feel, but I get that 2-3 feel for me. So maybe it's just strictly 3.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, what is his range right now?
Late lottery. So I mean, if his jump shot just starts hitting, maybe he really rises up the boards. But for now, I'm going to say 9 as his ceiling and 14, 15 as his floor. I'd like to see him maybe on the Thunder.
Okay.
If his shooting pans out, obviously.
That is a very pessimistic outlook of the Oklahoma City Thunder. I'll tell you that.
I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. I mean, who's falling off right now? The Pelicans?
Man, you don't think the Oklahoma City Thunder are going to make the playoffs. Patrick, that is a whole podcast right there.
All right, have me back on then, bro. I mean, I'd love to see the Pelicans fall off. I don't like Boogie. I've made that pretty clear online. I do not like Boogie.
Right.
So, I mean, like, I'd love for the Pelicans, but they just hit, like, 18 of 32 threes against my team last night. So it's hard for me to pick against them, even though my team won that game.
Yeah, they looked really, really good in that game. Boy.
Without AD.
That was I was enlightened by that. I mean, man, you hit me with 2 big bombs in this podcast. You got anybody else that you want to talk about? I mean, obviously we're going to develop this more throughout the rest of the season. You and I are working on our own mock draft, which will probably be out in January. We're not sure yet, but we're going to develop this more, and we're going to keep talking about this. But we really just wanted to get out there and talk about those first 10 or 11 guys today.
Yeah, I think we did an excellent job covering these guys. We're good for today.
All right, that's good. I can't wait to talk about this more with you, Patrick. I mean, this is something that you love to do, that I love to do, that we love to talk about. And I know it's not necessarily the most compelling listen, but I know for some people that the bread and butter of getting into scouting and talking about guys, how they're going to project and what their skill sets are, is something that's definitely worth listening to. And I know that I listen to it a lot.
Yeah, I try to listen to all the draft pods I can, honestly. So, hey, if you have a draft pod, send it to me and I'll listen. You listen to mine. We can go ahead and do a little trade-off. Yeah.
There we go. Anything you want to get a plug in before we're done?
Yeah, I just wrote an article about breaking down my 4 factors adjusted rating on 94 Feet Report. So
Awesome.
Check that out. It's a slightly adjusted formula from my previous 4 factors rating.
All right,
stuff.
man. Sounds good. And your Twitter handle?
Is Hoops Metrox. So that OX at the end is like Hoops Metrics, but I'm trying to be cool with my last name.
You're being cool. You're being
Okay,
cool,
cool,
man.
cool, cool.
This is an affirmation of your coolness.
Awesome.
All right, man. It's always nice to have you on the podcast. I'm sure it won't be too long before we have you back. Thanks for coming on, Patrick.
Yes, sir. Have an excellent day.
Yeah, you do the same, man.